On this glorious day, a day glorious with the outpouring of God's grace through the Holy Sacraments, let our hearts be filled with great thanksgiving that He has brought us here. Let us thank Him for the call which you have received and to which you have responded. Let us extend thanks to your parents and families who were your first formators, preparing you not merely for this day, but for a life of ministry. Since is not the family the fundamental unit of the church and of society, where the faith is passed on, and where, in God's plan, we first experience and learn to love. Now, I suppose in some ways this day might have been inevitable for at least one of these men, with a last name like Capella, which in Italian, for those of you who are not familiar, means chapel. It's maybe inevitable that there might be a vocation from such a family, perhaps. God arranges these things in His providence. But as God has been preparing you to enter into the sacred ministry, let us stand in awe of His providence that He has chosen you, and He has chosen you to minister in this time and in this place. And let us note the time and the place in which you are called to serve. The events, the very recent events in our country, have pointed to very deep wounds that need a healing and need a Savior. In many decades of our history in this land, racism has given rise to grave sins of injustice, the wounds of which run so deep. We human beings cannot heal these wounds. God can, and reminds us that we need a Savior. 6 months ago, who would have dreamed that you would be ordained in the midst of a global pandemic? But this time also points to a great need for conversion and salvation. For you see, we human beings in our world and in our society somehow think we can get along without God. We think that, don't we? And if we look at the pandemic from a divine perspective and not a human one, we know, of course, that God never causes evil, He never wills evil. He has foreseen this for our salvation, because we cannot fix this by mere human efforts. For instance, there are many forms of coronavirus, and we have never found a successful vaccine for any of them. So wouldn't it be a little bit foolish just to rely on mere human efforts and not beg divine assistance to guide the researchers to develop a vaccine in an ethical way, and also, by the grace of God, to bring an end to the pandemic? We can't fix this. And how important it is for us human beings to realize that we cannot live without God. And the Lord, in his wise providence, sees this time and calls us to conversion. And not just the world out there, you and me, especially me. And so this is the place and the time that the Lord has chosen for you to begin your pastoral ministry as a transitional deacon and as priests. And so how do we help, by the grace of God, bring people to a deeper conversion? And here comes the importance of the pastoral art of accompaniment inspired by the grace of God. Now, what does that really look like? We hear this word mentioned again and again and again. Accompaniment. And it is so important. But what does it really look like? How is it lived out in the course of the ministry of the parish priest, to which two of you will be soon assigned, and the other, God willing, will be coming to that day? To help us see what this looks like, I wish to point to the example of Father Michael McGivney. Father Michael McGivney is well known as the founder of the Knights of Columbus. He was a parish priest. He's been declared venerable. And recently, a miracle attributed to his intercession was approved, and he will soon be beatified. So, how does an American Catholic priest who is about to be beatified, how did he accompany people in this call to conversion? And I'd like to point to a very poignant example in his life. And this is the situation which surrounded a horrible thing like a murder. A man named Chip Smith was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. And Father McGivney accompanied him in this process of his conversion. He went to the prison to see him every day. It was hard work. It was difficult. And we get a little sense of this difficulty in the homily that he preached just a few days before Mr. Smith was executed. And I'd like to read for you an excerpt of that homily. Father McGivney said, "Our gathering this morning is on a very solemn occasion. The service has been held expressly for the benefit of one individual." Mr. Smith was celebrating Mass for him. "Under the circumstances, I shall say but a few words and detain you but a moment or two, that more time may be devoted to that one of whom I have spoken. I am requested by Mr. Smith to ask pardon for all the faults he may have had and all offenses he may have committed. And at his request, I ask for the prayers of all of you, that when next Friday comes, he may die a holy death. In saying that he does not care to live longer, I am using his words. This resignation on his part shows that he is prepared for what is to come in a few days. I trust that all of you will offer up fervent prayer to the throne of grace, that God will strengthen and prepare us to perform that awful duty which we shall be called upon to perform this time next Sunday. To me, this duty comes with almost a crushing weight. If I could consistently, with my duty, be far away from here next Friday, I should escape perhaps the most trying ordeal of my life. But this sad duty is placed my way by providence and must be fulfilled. If we receive your prayers, Mr. Smith and I shall be sustained by the supreme power in the hour of our great trial. In these words, we hear a priest who has entered into the suffering, the bitter suffering of an individual, and one who saw as his mission to accompany him all the way to the gallows. He refers to this in the plural as our joy, his and Mr. Smith's together. He refers to the trying weight of this duty. It's something that was so difficult for him, he found it crushing. And those who knew him later bore witness that it took him a long time to kind of recover from the great difficulty of this accompaniment. But Father McGivney did it not by his own efforts, but by the grace of God. And we know how much God worked through this when we hear the last words that Mr. Smith spoke to his mother the day before he was executed. He said, "Mother, don't cry for me. I will soon be better off. Just think if I had been shot that night and died without a moment's time for preparation, how much worse off I should be than I am now. I have asked God to forgive my sins, and I believe that I shall die a happy death." My dear sons, this is what pastoral accompaniment looks like in the life of an American Catholic priest who is about to be beatified. And it would behoove us to follow his example. You see, in any calling in life, there comes a time when the weight or the burden of that calling might be almost crushing. There might be a time when the husband and wife experience this. There are times when priests experience this. And it is so easy for us to shy away from or back away from those kinds of things that seem to be most difficult for us. But it is there so often when we need to accompany people on the road to conversion. We may not know what to do. We may not know what to say. It might be extremely difficult for us But there is no aspect of ministry that we can say that I'm not into that or I'm not good at that, so I'm just not going to do it. God calls us to be there. Because it's especially in these times of weakness when we feel we might be just about crushed that the grace of God superabounds. That is where the grace of God superabounds, because in our weakness is his strength. My dear sons, you are called and sent out in a world that deeply needs conversion. And we are best prepared when we enter into a deeper conversion ourselves. Just when we think we might have turned things over to the Lord and abandoned ourselves to him, things happen in our life when we realize, well, maybe I didn't really do this on a deep enough level after all. And God calls us to trust in him more and more and more and more as we face the various challenges that are involved in ministry and pastoral accompaniment. My dear sons, know that I pray for you. I pray for the superabundant outpouring of God's grace on you, not only this day, but every day of your ministry, that you may go out into the world and bring people, by the grace and power of God, to salvation, to bring them up. And so I ask you now just to quiet your hearts, to prepare yourselves for the promises that you are about to make.